What happened in 2005 in the disengagement was that essentially Israel went from occupying the place to surrounding the place. And they've had it under a brutal blockade since 2007. And yes, you were right.
Why do you, I don't agree that blockade was brutal by any means.
You don't think the blockade...
The blockade went up in 2007 after a brutal terrorist organization with the stated goal of killing every Jew on the planet was elected as the sole governing authority of the Gaza Strip just after they finished killing 1,000 Jews. I wonder why a blockade went up. I want you guys to imagine this like 9/11 just happened. You know how Afghanistan was like overrun with Al-Qaeda? Al-Qaeda did 9/11. Afghanistan was overrun with Al-Qaeda. They weren't the actual government of Afghanistan, right? Okay, cool. Now I want you to imagine that's the situation in Mexico. The Al-Qaeda are like basically controlling Afghanistan. It's their main base of operations. What are we going to do to Mexico? Let's say Al-Qaeda is like the drug cartel in Mexico. It's not the drug cartel. It's Al-Qaeda. We're going to put up a big fucking blockade and not let them do anything. If we're able to. And Israel was able to. And they should have done that, right? Your obligation as a government is to protect your people. And that includes the 2 million Arabs that are citizens of Israel, 21% of their population. They have an obligation to protect those people, right? So they have, like, you can't just let the genocidal terrorist organization whose goal is to indiscriminately kill people in Israel continue to do that. They just spent 5 years from 2000 to 2005 sneaking suicide bombs across the Israel-Gaza border and jumping onto public buses and killing people, right? They bombed schools, they bombed public buses, they bombed shopping malls, they bombed grocery stores, they bombed markets, they bombed everything, right? School buses, right? There was one really bad incident where the suicide bomber got on a school bus, waited till the bus pulled up to the school, and then detonated himself. Killed a ton of children and tried to kill...
You're talking about in Israel?
Yeah, in Israel. So...
Okay, but that's not like a blockade issue. That's like a border security.
No, it's a total blockade issue. Okay, so first of all, you need to prevent these people from getting the materials that allow them to produce suicide bombs, first of all. In addition to that, you also have to police your border and prevent them from crossing the border in an unfettered way. Gazans still cross the border every day, but it's in a controlled fashion. You have to be screened by the Israeli government.
That probably wasn't the best policy in hindsight.
What wasn't the best policy?
Gazans crossing the border.
I mean, what are you going to do? Say you're not allowed to leave the country? I mean, there's only two
isn't that what they already do? Like, they don't have passports. Like, they can't leave Gaza anyway.
I mean, listen, like, in a perfect world, I agree with you, but like optically, it's not going to work because then the UN is just going to say, well, Israel, they trap people in Gaza. They're not even allowed to leave. Oh my God. But, well, like, I mean, 100,000 people.
I don't know. My problem, I guess, is I'm kind of anti-blockade. Like, that's just, as someone who supports freedom, like, even with, like, I know a lot of people in Gaza are making bombs, but you can't blockade someone. So.
Do you think that if Afghanistan, let's say Mexico doesn't exist and Afghanistan is our southern neighbor, if 9/11 just happened, would you support a U.S. blockade on our neighbor Afghanistan?
I would support very good border security. I just don't know if you can, like I mean, that's literally like tyranny, is blockading a country. Like, that's what the British did on like a very minuscule level.
Let's say this. Let's add to the analogy a little bit.
Like, that's what caused the U.S. Revolution.
So let's add to the analogy a little bit.
Sure.
Afghanistan is our southern neighbor. They just committed 9/11. They spent the last 5 years jumping across our border and indiscriminately murdering children. Okay, now they're building missiles inside of Afghanistan, Mexico, right? They're building missiles and they're indiscriminately shooting those missiles into the U.S. Should we blockade them so that they can't get the materials to build those missiles?
It's tough. Yeah, I mean,
I would say I would do it. But, I think you should. I think your obligation as a government is to protect your people, and I think that if this is the only way to protect your people, I think you have to blockade them. I don't think there's another option.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, how effective is? I mean, this is kind of a dumb argument, but like, how effective is the Iron Dome on like preventing said rockets or missiles from landing on civilians?
It's pretty effective, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Missiles still land on civilians.
Yeah, no, and like, honestly, like, this is why it's such a tough issue. Is I actually totally agree with, like, I sympathize and I understand that if like your brother got hit by like a rocket or a suicide bomber let's talk about rockets for this debate, not a suicide bomber. Like, of course, you're going to want to go and like level all of Gaza.
Well, they're not trying to level all of Gaza.
Well, they did. They leveled all.
But that's not what they're trying to do. It's just because of Hamas's tactics.
But I'm lucky enough that I'm far enough from the issue that I'm not like, thank God, like my family has not been killed, and my heart goes out to anyone whose family was killed by a terrorist. But it's like when we went and like just decimated Baghdad after 9/11, was that really like the right answer? Like, was that? Well, I don't know. I just.
We definitely should have gone to Afghanistan, and we definitely should have fought after 9/11 because the
yeah.
Middle East works off of
I'm just
strength.
saying, like, cooler heads need to prevail, and yeah. I mean, after 9/11, like the U.S. was bloodthirsty, but it wasn't like the best policy. Is my point of view. And I agree with you. It's hard. Like, if someone's lobbing rockets over your border, like, what do you do? But I don't know. Well, you can see that like a blockade is like, it's the most anti-freedom thing that you can do.
I don't think people who indiscriminately slaughter
like
other people.
it's literally like it gives to all the people who say it's like a prison camp. Like, that is one of like the top.
It's not a prison camp because you can
reasons.
leave.
Well, you can't import whatever you want. You can't get materials.
You can't import the materials that are used to make bombs. And here's another thing about
for the record, I'm not making a case it is a prison camp. I'm just saying it's not like.
Sure, optically it's tough.
They lack a lot of freedoms there.
Yeah, sure. Well, I don't think they deserve a lot of freedoms there. But the problem is that like another issue that you run into with these like missiles is, yeah, the Iron Dome is very effective at intercepting missiles. It's not 100% effective. But do you remember when maybe it was the Iran attack? I can't remember. I've seen the Iron Dome missiles. They are huge, right? Like, they are heavy. I've held one. I've also held Hamas rockets. And what I'll tell you is they're huge and they're heavy. But do you remember when Iran attacked Israel? Do you remember the one person who died?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
How did he die?
Just fell on him.
Yeah.
Fell on him.
Yeah. What goes up has to come down. So like even if those missiles don't strike and explode on the ground, you're still getting debris falling from the sky that can potentially land on a building. It could land on a person's head, and that will kill them. So
yeah. No, I'm by no means saying like lobbing rockets over a border is a wholesome endeavor.
But you have to stop it, right? You have to stop the rockets from coming across the border.
Yeah. And I mean, let's be honest. Yeah, if Mexico was lobbing, if Tijuana was lobbing rockets into San Diego, like the U.S. would have leveled Tijuana a billion years ago.
Well, I don't think it's about leveling Tijuana. I think it's about taking care of business and getting out the people who are attacking you. Now, Palestinian civilians are not attacking you, and Israel has done a fantastic job at preventing those people from being in danger. They drop leaflets, they roof knock, they send out mass phone calls, mass text messages, they drop leaflets with evacuation orders, they set up evacuation zones, humanitarian zones, they ship humanitarian aid and food across the border. Unfortunately, Hamas steals that humanitarian aid and sells it back to the Palestinians so they can buy weapons. But Israel's undoubtedly trying to reduce civilian casualties at a rate that, but by a mode that no other country practices. You know, we don't drop leaflets or make mass phone calls or send mass text messages every time we bomb somebody.
I think we did in World War II in some cases.
In World War
II,
like we
Japan.
did. Sometimes with Japan, before we dropped the nuclear bombs.
I don't
but in most cases,
bombed anyone to that extent. Well, I guess back then.
No, I mean, for sure we did.
Yeah.
But it's not.
I don't know if we dropped leaflets then.
It's not a widespread practice, especially the phone calls and text messages. So, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I don't know, but like, listen to yourself. You're like, I don't think those people deserve. Like, of course, Hamas doesn't deserve shit. Like, they suck. But like, there are a lot of people who are not, like, who are just living day to day in the Gaza Strip, or at least were.
Yeah.
Who, like, I don't know. Like, do they deserve some freedoms? Like, we believe that all people deserve freedoms.
Then leave. Like, if you want to not be guilty by association, leave and go live somewhere else. Like, you are surrounded by people.
Can they do that?
Yes. Of course they can.
Like, where can they go?
They can go to Egypt. They can go to Jordan. They can go to any Middle Eastern country. They could apply for refugee status and go live in Europe. They could go wherever they wanted to, right? They could go to the West Bank.
Right.
Which has freedom, by the way, right?
Yeah.
At least some degree of freedom.
A lot more. Yeah. A lot more. Yeah.
Whatever freedom they don't have, that's the fault of the Palestinian Authority. But they could go there, right? Why don't you go to the West Bank? That's still Palestinian territory. Well, the reason they don't is probably because they're happy where they are. But they can't convince their families to go, which is unfortunate. But it's like you surround yourself with people who support or people who are a part of the organization whose stated goal is to kill every Jew on the planet, and you wonder why you keep getting into conflict with the Jews. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, and not only do these people say this is their stated goal, they act on it. They launch the Second Intifada. They kill 1,000 Jews, a lot of them being children. Most of them, almost all of them, being civilians. They attack everywhere you'd find a civilian, nowhere you'd find a soldier. Shopping malls, public schools, public buses, markets, grocery stores, bars, grills, etc., right? These aren't military bases. These are places you'd find a family of 5 out eating on a weekend, right? These are places they're attacking. Then they get elected and they start launching rockets into Israel, but not before they kill every member of their political opposition in the Gaza Strip. These are other Palestinians, right? Slaughtered them. Okay, so like, as far as I'm concerned, there comes a point where, like, it's not. I'm not saying that you should collectively punish people, but what I am saying is that, like, Israel's obligation is to protect their people, and if you are a part of a society that has made it their entire goal to kill the people to your north, if by extension you suffer some of the consequences of your government that you voted in, that's not my problem, right? These people are murdering people in a mass fashion. They're launching rockets into Israel every single day, and Israel is looking at it from a perspective of, we have an obligation to make sure our people don't die. And the only way to do that is to blockade Gaza. And by the way, they're still allowed to have stuff in Gaza. They're still allowed to have stuff. What they're not allowed to have are things that can be used to make bombs. That's it.
Right, but are like civilians responsible for everything their governments do? Like, even in, like,
no, but that doesn't change the fact that the government is still doing those things, and the government to the north has an obligation to protect their people. And if they have the means to blockade Gaza and prevent the materials used to make bombs and weapons from getting into Gaza, they should absolutely exercise that to protect their own people.
How brutal do you think the Egyptians are?
Pretty brutal. Yeah.
They allowed stuff in.
Okay, I mean, since some stuff has gotten in, yes, that's true. Since
more than some stuff.
Okay.
More than some stuff.
Okay, I'll say this, right, because there's been different levels of blockade, even before 2007, going back. I know in 1996, they had like a pretty strong blockade that year. According to the World Bank, it contracted 40% of the GDP of Gaza. So just for reference, the Great Depression was a 30% contraction. This was in 1996. For 1 year, they gave them something worse than our Great Depression. That was just 1 year. From 2007 on, there's been a blockade of that country. You don't think that's kept the country poor?
Why do you think there's a blockade of any kind?
Why is there a blockade? Well, I mean, the argument from Israel would be...
No, why do you think?
I would say, okay, I think that the disengagement, I think Smotrich was correct when he said that, I'm sorry, my mistake there. I think which another quote that I'm sure you're familiar with, but Dov Weissklav, who was the senior advisor to Sharon, was the prime minister at the time, he essentially said the reason we're doing the disengagement, the reason we're doing this is so that we can put the peace process in formaldehyde.
I switched from due dates to due dates, and it made me go from weeks behind to...
Did he say due dates?
Oh, we got an ad. No, we got an ad.
Yeah, no.
This is the reason we're
You're
doing
not
it.
answering my question.
Yes,
You're continuing to cite
I'm getting
very
there.
right-wing Israeli politicians. But what do you
I'm getting
think
there.
is the reason?
I'm getting there. I'm saying, so I think they disengaged in order to kill the peace process. I think they put the full blockade around the country for the reason that they've always kind of done it there, that, yeah, they don't want too much stuff getting in. They want to keep them, as they put it, on a diet, and they don't want rockets to fly into Israel.
The second one is a kind of important one.
Yeah, by the way, the diet is just no bombs. You can't have you have stuff that you can kill us with. That's the diet, right?
Well, in Douglas Murray, like, his response here, he's like, well, the second one's kind of important, don't you think? And, like, I think that's one of his stronger parts of the whole debate.
Yeah.
One, isn't it? The final
Yeah,
one you said.
it is.
If the Palestinian leadership in Gaza after 2005 had not from the get-go decided to use Gaza as a stockpiling place for rockets to fire into Israel, all of it would be different. If they had just resisted the temptation that so many of us do in our lives to stop keeping RPGs in our cellars and then Katyusha rockets in our children's bedrooms, all of it could have been different. If that desire to live in peace beside your neighbors had superseded the desire to stockpile rockets, it would all be different.
Yeah, or if
And
Israel
what
just
you
hadn't
describe
occupied
as-
them for 60 years, it would all be different too.
They
I mean,
weren't
why is the onus
occupying-
always
they
on
weren't
them?
Well, you believe in self-determination, I'm sure. Yes.
I believe in individual rights. Yeah, sure.
Okay, individual rights. And that includes the right to make bad decisions. Yes. The Palestinians in Gaza, when they voted in Hamas, made a very bad decision.
Yeah, of course.
And in the years, hang on. And in the years after that, they made bad decision after bad decision. It was a very bad decision to continually fire thousands of rockets into Israel. It was a very bad decision to use what boats came in early on and to use the smuggling networks from Egypt, not to bring in supplies you could actually build a thriving society with, but to bring in rockets. It was a very bad idea. No, there was not starvation in Gaza after 2005. No, there was no deficit of goods coming in. I've been plenty of times.
There was no deficit?
No, there are
No
plenty
goods were kept out.
There are plenty. How have you?
There are like massive like shopping malls that you could look at in Gaza and like there were massive shopping malls in Gaza that you could easily mistake for being a shopping mall in the United States.
Been to the crossing points?
No.
Right. Pause it for a second though, Cam.
Yeah.
They don't really get into this, but he brings up the point that they had like a 40% drop in GDP in 1 year. And like, I know a lot of people don't know what that means, but that means massive suffering.
Why?
Like, I know you know what that means. Like that's like, that would be hell on earth in the United States.
Why?
Because people can't buy food. I mean, like that's
why does
GDP
that mean
growth is
they
like,
can't buy food?
Well, the whole reason why we have, why we're a rich country, why we have everything that we have is because we have not just GDP stagnation, but like at least 1% to 2%, 3% growth every year, sometimes 4%. Like as soon as you start contracting even a little bit, like people really start hurting. You disagree?
Yeah.
I mean, what would like 40% GDP like negative growth look like in Israel?
Yeah, but they're not exporting. They're not producing anything for the world. So like, of course they're going to have low
Right, but you
GDP.
still have an economy. I mean, that's almost worse, honestly.
Right, but they're getting the food, right? Like they have enough food and they have enough water and they have enough commodities to like keep them busy and stuff, right? Their GDP is going to be extremely low.
They're not
exporting.
chickens. They're like humans. Like
Yeah, but they're not. The reason their GDP is low is not because they're poor. It's because they're not exporting anything. You get what I'm saying? Like they're not. No,
okay,
not industrial,
but that's not what he's saying. He's not saying they had a low GDP. He's saying they went down 40%
in GDP.
Right.
Yeah, because they're not exporting anything.
Right, but they still have like a GDP from their own economy. Like GDP isn't just exports.
No, but exports are calculated into. They're like a huge part of what your GDP is.
Okay, so what you're saying is, I'm not debating you on this. I'm just clarifying.
Yeah.
So what happened is they banned them from exporting in that year. Is that what happened?
Well, no, they're not like. I think that it probably became a little bit more difficult to export things in whatever year it was. But
okay, banned wasn't the right word, but you know what I mean. Yeah,
their GDP is probably already like, I don't know. Let me look up what the GDP of Gaza is. It's probably already nothing, right? So you blockade them, of course it goes down, but their GDP is probably nothing because they're not exporting anything. Let me see. GDP in Gaza.
It's okay. We don't have to get bogged down on this, but they don't really.
I don't
bring
see.
it back up.
I don't even know where he got this. I don't see anything that even like isolates the Gaza GDP. Everything I'm seeing is the GDP of the Gaza and the West Bank combined. But
do they have a GDP?
Regardless, like they're gonna have a really low GDP because they're not exporting anything. It doesn't mean they don't have anything. And regardless, I think like Jester's making a good point in the chat is like did the blockade have negative impacts on some of the people in Gaza? I'm absolutely certain it did, right? But that doesn't mean that it wasn't justified or necessary.
Right, and like I come from like a school of thought where like if you put like a 3% or a 3% tax on like tea, like you start a war over it. So I'm very pro freedom.
Well, I don't see you enlisting over here, Christian. You might want to grab your musket and get to work.
I know, man. But I as like a human rights thing, like you're not allowed to just tell people they can't trade. You're not allowed to tell people that they can't import.
Do you agree with prison? If I killed you right now, should I go to jail?
Yeah, but you can't tell me that like a grandmother, like Like, you can't tell me every grandmother and every like 5-year-old deserves to go to prison in the Gaza Strip. Like,
But every time you deal with a foreign policy issue, so like when the United States
Right.
deals with Russia, they deal with Ukraine, they deal with XYZ, whatever country we're dealing with, Israel, whatever, right? We're treating each of those countries as an entity, right? When you if I try to kill you or I kill you, I'm an entity. I go to jail because I'm the entity that committed that crime, right? So the world stage is each country is viewed as a single entity, right? So if this entity, the Gaza Strip, killed 1,000 people in Israel, and then continues to try to kill Jews every single day, they as an entity are being restrained. They're being put in a straitjacket, right? So they can't kill people anymore. So like, there's no way to like step in and say.
Let's put this in perspective. How many people do you think came over the border on October 7th?
How many people
during the
do I
attack?
think came over the border? I have no idea.
Yeah,
Thousands.
I'm not like asking for an exact number.
Yeah,
but, like
thousands.
it wasn't even 10,000 probably, right?
Sure.
It was probably less than 10,000, and
Maybe.
probably a lot less.
I mean, let me look it up. But anyway, your point.
But I think my point stands true. It's like, out of what was the population of Gaza City? Like, it was like 4 million or 1 million or something. I know it's very densely populated, but
It's 2 million. Like 2.6.
2 million. Okay, it's one of the most dense populations on Earth, but maybe not the largest population on Earth, of course. But like, okay, let's say 5,000 to 10,000 people came over the border. Like, what about all the people that didn't come over the border? Are they culpable? Do
Well,
they
they're not
deserve to be put in the
culpable, but it doesn't
straitjacket?
change. They're not culpable, but it doesn't change the fact that Israel has an obligation to protect its people, and this entity, the Gaza Strip, has done something that has placed the people of Israel in an unsafe position, and the Israeli government has the ability to take its people out of that unsafe position, and therefore are forced by the government in the Gaza Strip, whether or not all of its people are implicated in this situation or not, to protect its people. So they have to do that. And I don't think anyone should blame them for doing that. I think that, if
I agree. I'm not naive on that, but I think having better border security, it's kind of like 9/11. Like,
But
we could've shut
the better
air-
border security
the-
doesn't prevent missiles. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, yeah, I mean, fair enough, but missiles were not the October 7th attack. Right?
They were a big part of it. And also,
Uh,
another thing too is like they air attacked. They flew
Right.
Buckeyes over the border, and that border security is not going to help with that either.
I mean,
so-
it was pretty low tech air attack.
Sure, it was a low tech air attack.
like had they been a little more prepared, they could have probably.
Sure, but it was
deterred
also on a holiday, and they love to attack
Right.
Jews on holidays, and when nobody's
Yeah, yeah.
working, and they also thought there was going to be attack in the north and whatever. But ultimately, like, I mean, I would put it in a situation like this: if my entire family is in a house, let's say I have 10 kids, my
Yeah.
whole family, me, my girlfriend, and all of our kids are in this house. My cats, I have a dog. We're all in this house. Okay. Somebody is spraying from a Browning machine gun 50 caliber bullets into my house. I have a button that is going to, if I press it, kill this person. Okay. But there's also a 10% chance that their family is going to suffer. Right? A 10% chance.
Right.
They're not even going to
Yeah.
die. They're just going to suffer. It's going to be unfortunate for them. But this person's going to stop shooting at me and my family. I'm pressing that button, and I'm pressing it again and again and again and again every day, all day, without thought. I don't care. Right?
Yeah.
Kill the person. Your family suffers. That sucks. I don't care. You're attacking me, and
Yeah.
it is my obligation to protect my family, and I'm going to do that. I don't care if it hurts your family. You're the one shooting at me.
Yes. Now, like, as like the family, I get that. It doesn't mean that it's rational though. Like, that's
It's totally
very
rational.
Animalistic. It's like survival behavior, which is
Well,
totally
it's you're a libertarian. It's not
animalistic and
aggression
fine. And
principle.
like,
This person
well,
is
and that's how humans work. I'm not like faulting that, but like, is that like the government's best decision
Yes.
making?
Yes, because there isn't a better option. The government's not going to step in and say, "All right, well, raise your hand if you support Hamas, and keep it down if you don't." And then say, "All right, all of you who didn't raise your hands, come with me." Right? They're going to say, "We're in a really tough situation right now, where all our people are dying every day. Our only option is to institute a blockade on the Gaza Strip. They can still get food, they can still get building materials, they can still get water, electricity, phones, whatever they need. They can still get all that stuff, but they can't get stuff that's going to be used to make bombs. We need that to protect our people. These people are still going to be fine. And hey, we'll even step in and pay for a lot of this stuff, right? So the Gazans don't have to pay for it. We'll even provide some of this stuff for free. And that's what Israel did, right? But they also police the border. And a lot of this is just border security. If you're not talking about the shipping blockade, like you keep saying border security, if you're not talking about the shipping blockade, the rest of it is all border security. Israel is just policing what goes over their border into the Gaza Strip. That's all it is.
Right.
Which is, I think, totally fair, right? If a ship wants to cross Israel's border, I don't understand why they shouldn't have a say in what that truck has in it.
Right, but could like a ship show up in like Gaza City on the other side?
No.
Sounds like a blockade.
Yeah, because Israel's not going to check every ship that wants to go to port in Gaza, right? It's the same reason, like in Bethlehem, you can't drive your car over the border. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians cross over the West Bank and Israel border every single day, but you can't drive your car from Bethlehem to Israel. The reason for that is because they don't have the technology to check the cars in a timely fashion. It'd be like sitting on the 405 at peak hour, and you're just sitting there parked. Nobody, like, I bet if they opened up the border for cars and did checks like that, like actual searches of the cars for everybody and whatever, I bet no Palestinians would even want to drive their car across the border. There's nothing stopping them from crossing the border and then renting a car in Israel and driving around, but it's literally just because we don't have the time to sit here and like search every car. It would take forever. So they have people cross on foot, and you put your bags through a X-ray machine, just like the airport. You never meet a soldier, and then now you're in Israel. You can go work or get medical help or whatever you need in Israel. It's the same reason for ships. Like you're not going to check every compartment of a ship and make sure that the bottom steerage isn't packed full of rocket propelled grenades. It's just not safe. So yeah. I mean, I don't blame them at all for doing what they do. I think that it's absolutely necessary to protect Israelis. But let's make sure we keep going.
When were you last there?
I love how we're like just inching into the podcast.
I know. You're going to like this next part.
Okay, cool.
You've never been.
Well, am I not allowed to talk about it now?
I don't like this argument from Douglas.
It's
already.
Retarded
I don't
to
like
use that word.
I don't like it.
It's so like, some of his tactics are such leftist tactics. You're not an expert. You're not allowed to weigh in on things. You've never been there, so you're never allowed. Like, is he allowed to have an opinion on like the Vietnam War?
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean?
It's like how could Douglas Murray have an opinion on World War II if he presumably was not alive for World War II?
Well, he's like, I can't time travel.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like, okay, so your opinion's wrong then.
Exactly. So like, I've been to Israel. But I was talking about Israel a long time before.
In your mind, you were right about Israel before you had been to Israel, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You can have opinions about things if you've never been to those places, and you can study them, even if you never experienced them. It doesn't change your ability to have an opinion about those things. So I totally
conversely, like, I'm surprised I didn't hammer him with this. Like, has like Douglas Murray been to the Gaza Strip? Like, is he allowed to have an opinion for not going in?
I think
he's gone and like interviewed like local people who live there, or has he gone with like a whole military around him?
I don't know if he has or he hasn't, but he says he's gone to the Gaza Strip. All right, we're getting yelled at by the comments. They're saying let it play because we paused after literally 1 second.
No.
All right, we're coming
Have you ever been to Nazi Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings about them?
You can't time travel, but you can travel.
Okay, but so what? So what's the point? Like,
No,
okay.
I find that
lots of people have been there and agree with me, and lots of people have been there and agree with you.
Yeah, but
so
if
I don't
you're
know
going to
what
spend a year and a half talking about a place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
All right. I just think this is a non-argument.
You don't
but
think?
Okay. No, I think it's a non-argument.
But if you're next,
Well, you have to go and touch the ground.
no, I think you have to see. I think it's a good idea to see stuff, particularly.
I'll say this, just quick pause. You do get a lot of additional context and knowledge by going to Israel that you wouldn't get by not visiting Israel. And I do think that if you're going to make this topic like your shtick, like I know we already argued about this, but if you're going to make it your shtick and it is available to you, you probably should go. But I don't think that means that you can't be correct just because you haven't been to Israel. I was obviously correct, and I hadn't been until I did. But
yes, and I'll make this really quick. But I know a lot of people who have gone and lived in Palestine, not Gaza, Palestine. And I mean,
I've never
are we
heard
allowed
of
to say
before. No, what
Yeah,
is?
where-
I don't even
I
know
can't
where that
find
is.
it on a map.
I could not
but
find that on a map.
the fictional land.
Is
the
it?
fairy
It's like
tale
it's
land
like
of
down the road
Palestine.
from Narnia, like maybe in between Narnia
Yeah,
and the
they
Bikini
went
Bottom.
through the wardrobe and ended up there. But no, just to make it quick, they have had the same thing happen where they're like now they identify with the Palestinian people and their plights and everything. And they're like, they're real people. It's been humanized. It's changed everything for me. So yeah, I mean, I think that works both ways.
Yeah. All right, let's continue.
If you
Okay.
spend a career talking about something, yes. I have a journalistic rule of trying never to talk about a country even in passing unless I've at least been there.
Okay.
It's a
But that's
sort of
not-
normal. It's a normal thing to do. You're talking about. Hang on. You're talking about crossing points, and not only have you never been to a crossing point in either Egypt or in Israel, but you've never even been to the region.
Okay. Again, I
How
think this is a
can you-
non-argument.
I've been to those checkpoints, by the way. You're through them in like literally 2 minutes.
Hang
I
on,
don't
no,
understand.
it's not a non-argument.
Yeah, it is.
It's not a non-argument. If you're insisting that you're an expert, or not claiming you're an expert, but still talking about it, about the provisions going into Gaza or not, if you've never seen any of this going on.
So you're not
That's
allowed to
amazing
speak
to
about
me.
things that you've read about. You can only speak about things that you've seen with your own eyes.
You can talk about what you want, as you're proving. But that is a different matter from
this
spending
guy is
an
so
awfully
pompous.
long amount of time talking about an issue in a region you haven't even had the courtesy to visit, whilst developing all of these views about it. I mean, now I slightly get an idea of where you're coming from. You've read about this blockade, and so you imagine that that's what it is. I imagine you've read all the people who say that Gaza was a concentration camp, and you probably think that too. Am I right?
I mean, again, literally a concentration camp. It shares a lot of similarities, I would think.
Wow. Well, as I say, you can't time travel
Let's go
back to the
back to the
Nazi
block-
era.
let's
but
go
you
back to
could
the
go
blockade.
to the Middle
Okay.
East and actually visit it.
Okay,
It's
the
not
World
hard to
World
do.
Bank said in
Who
1996
cares about what are these sources? Who cares about the World Bank?
for the
Now
1
the
year of the
libertarians
blockade.
are quoting the World Bank. I love it.
It doesn't mean anything. This is a non-argument. Yes, I'm saying the World Bank did their own analysis of this, and they said that it was
Why
a
don't
40%
you do
of
your
the-
own analysis?
Hold on. You got to stop interrupting
Okay.
and let him finish
I
the
will.
sentence.
The
Fire
World
away.
Bank said that 40% drop in the GDP of 1 year due to the blockade. And there's been a blockade from 2007 on. So are you saying that this hasn't had an economic effect? Is that the argument?
No, of course it'll have an economic effect.
So you're saying you have to be on the ground and do an audit of the blockade
No,
in order to be able
I
to comment
think
on
you
it?
should at least know what it is, what the territory is, what the situation is in the region. Yes, absolutely.
And the only way
Absolutely.
to do that is to be there in person.
I think that's the best way. It's not the only way, but it's the best way, for sure. For sure. If you have never seen the countries in question, you've never spoken to the people in question, you've never interviewed anyone, you've never gone around, you've never seen the terrain, and so on, and you've used Wikipedia, I'm sorry, no, that's not the same thing.
Okay, well,
So like if you haven't
I've just
walked
used
through,
Wikipedia, but
if you haven't walked through Gaza since it was bombed, which I'm assuming this guy has. If you haven't done that, then you can't comment on whether or not it was a genocide. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree with you. I do
Like,
think,
he's-
however,
I'm not making that point. He's just making a bad point.
I agree with you. And like I said, I
Because
fully-
what if you like all the drone videos were AI and you walk through and it's Gaza City's still there or it's like totally not there. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah, I totally agree with you that
Still.
like you don't have to visit a place to like understand it and to
yeah. I think it's preferable,
whatever.
sure.
Yeah.
I'll give him that.
Yeah. But what I'll say is like I think he made a fair point that like if you talk about this all the time and you assert yourself as an authority in this field and the conflict is still ongoing or the place still does exist in the form that you're pushing back on, maybe it's worth it to go give it a visit. Right? I've been to the West Bank, I've been to Israel, I've been to the Gaza border. It's obviously not safe for me to go there right now, but like I've gone and visited these places, and I will say, like, while I think that my opinion was very valid before I went to Israel, I think that my opinion was very much solidified when I went to Israel. Like I received a lot of very small, nuanced context that,
Yeah.
just expanded my view on a lot of things.